Hello, my name is Dr. Dice, and I'm here to share with you how I ended up standing here in front of you. I've had many titles I've earned over the years: Navy SEAL, medic on an ambulance, firefighter, father of five, husband, addict, alcoholic, 7-Eleven clerk, Slavic dancer, kayak instructor. Um, all those are part of what make up this man you sit here in front of you today. And I'd like to share with you a little bit how I got here, both for me, but also for if someone out there can hear parts of my story that may relate to them, and maybe they can find their own path, because I've learned in my journey that I need to give it away in order to keep it. And I seem to have found something pretty amazing. So this is my story. I started off as Tony Dice, born out in California, oldest of 8 brothers and sisters. We had a big family. My parents were like surfing, pot smoking, hippies kinda, very religious, very Catholic. They raised us. I mean, they put us in Catholic school early on, and then I think the Catholic school wasn't quite Catholic enough, so they pulled us out and homeschooled us, all 8 of us. They homeschooled us all through high school. It was crazy. They early in my life, they moved from San Diego all the way up to Northern California, up in the mountains. For that first year up there, we lived in a tent on the side of a river up in Siskiyou County. A bunch of kids in a tent side of the river. It was an adventurous upbringing. I remember swimming in the river and climbing through the woods, and I always had a machete, and it was quite an experience. We ended up finding a home up there, and the homeschooling was tough. I was, I guess, always wondering where I measured up to other kids. I had this sense of not knowing if I was enough or I was keeping up with my peers. And as the years went by, I remember, if I crossed another child at like a gas station, I would ask them questions, math questions, to see if they were at the same level as me. And so I had this almost like this little longing of wondering if I'm enough. Up in the woods, I mean, we played a lot of games, built a lot of tree houses, a lot of rope swings, a lot of booby traps, all those things kids do when left unattended out in the woods. But it was a tremendous upbringing. However, as I got older, I remember turning around 15, 16 and realizing this small town we lived in, it was the town of Horse Creek, California, population 89, very small town. If you figured 10 of them were in our family, so more than 10% of the population I'm related to. There was only one girl within 100 miles my age, and she didn't like me. And so I began to feel like I needed to get out of town. But before all that happened, my dad passed away up there, and both of complications of a life as an addict, but also cancer towards the end, and it was a very sudden death. And I remember there was a small church up there in Horse Creek, and I made his casket out of wood in our shed, and where all the kids are lined up in the funeral for the funeral, and we're all crying, as you expect we would. And I remember my grandfather had made the journey up there, and he leaned over into my ear and he whispered, "This is your family now. You're the man of the house. Be the man. Men don't cry." And I remember standing up as best I could, trying to suck it up, and I don't remember crying after that. I mean, I think that was pretty much the end of me, the beginning of me not expressing feeling, and and it was tough. It was a lot of pressure on a young kid up there in the woods, and all the kids. And I remember just having this. I always had this little internal feeling of adventure, and I had a fedora I would wear and a leather jacket. I thought I was Indiana Jones, and I remember running away from home, and I ran all the way down California, back down to San Diego. and I got into a junior college down there. I got my GED and I tested in, and walking around campus of this huge junior college, Mesa College in San Diego, and I mean there are more people in one of my classrooms than my whole hometown. I remember my feet like hurting because they weren't used to walking on concrete all day, and still wearing my fedora and my leather jacket, and still not finding a girlfriend, and and it was just you can imagine this young kid, 16 years old, in a junior college, far from home, and I was just had this sense of adventure. It was just it gripped me, and I took a bunch of classes there. It was only $3 a unit back then, and I kept changing my major over and over again. And I remember that there was a lot of excitement around the medical field, and I kind of took a liking to the emergency medical technician certification. I got that class, and when visiting home, not that much later, there's a small town of Wairika on the way, and they were hiring. And I've for a long time, been a member of the Klamath River Hose Company, a firefighter with them, and we'd go on calls as needed up and down the river, and I loved that. I loved showing up when someone was in need. I loved charging towards the flames, but there was something special about the ambulance service there, that they would show up, and everyone's waiting for them to get there, and it seems like they show up and like they were the man. They showed up. We'd load the patients into the ambulance, and they'd code 3, life and death, back to it was like an adventure, and so after getting my EMT certification, I heard that ambulance service was hiring. I went and sat in their office, and they were like, well, maybe not. They gave me him-haw, and I said, I'm going to keep coming back here. And I went out and I bought my own jumpsuit that matched their jumpsuit, and I bought myself a duty belt, and I would sit in their office, and they were still hemming and hawing, you're kind of young, and you don't have much experience. And every day for like a week, I sat in that office, and they gave me a chance. And so that was a cool job where we get to sleep in the bunkhouse and wait for the call to come, and you're laying there waiting for someone to dial 911, and then you get to show up, lights and siren, and be the man. And it felt just very fulfilling, and I loved the people, and it was just a lot of this external gratification, and man, I loved that job. I truly did. And as the years went by, you get good at it, and you begin to excel and climb the ladder. And I did notice that over time, there'd be calls where we had to wait for law enforcement to show up, and for the site to be secured, like any kind of domestic disturbance or anything that had to do with any kind of danger. We had to wait and for the law enforcement to show up and clear the house and let us in. And it seemed like they had faster cars, and they had guns, and they were the man. And so I started taking night classes to transfer to, hopefully, I think there was a sheriff's department at the time that was looking to hire, and I was trying to get ready to take that next step. And I remember our station boss pulling me aside and said, Dice, what are you doing? You're a firefighter, now you're on an ambulance service, and now you're going to go, you want to be a cop? And I said, I want to be everything. I want to be what's the hardest thing I can be? And he said, right there, he said, a Navy SEAL. And my entire decision-making tree, right then, they're just like, I want to do that. That was it. I didn't do any research. I just instantly wanted to do something as hard as I could be. I wanted to get to the top of the food chain. And that's, within a week, I was down talking to a recruiter. And they signed me up for the delayed enlistment program, and they gave me 6 months to get in shape, and gave me this big long workout they called a warning order. And I started training just to be a Navy SEAL. When I was running through town, and I was excited about this. And it's Wairika's not a huge town. It's 50,000 people, but it was enough that I could run up and down the main streets and wave to people, and they kind of get to know you a little bit. And I felt like I was training for a mission. I was excited. And the apartment I was living in up there, if I ran home After one of my long runs, I run up this hill, and my apartment's kind of up on the hill, kind of overlooking the town a little bit. And I charged up this day. I was charging up that hill, and I get to my house, and and you wonder, why am I sharing a story about my running? This little segment of my story captures what's going to continue to happen in my life over and over again. So I charged up this hill, and I get to my house, and I'm breathing hard. I'm looking out, going, feeling pretty freaking good for just kicking ass in that run. And I look behind me that day, and there's this dirt road going further up the mountain. And I charge up that dirt road, just balls to the wall, get to the top of the hill, and I'm breathing heavy, and I'm looking on now a bigger view of the town, and I'm just like, fuck yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is fucking awesome. And then behind me, on the top of this mountain now, there's this city water tower. So I start climbing up around their little security thing they have, and I climb all the way up the ladder, all the way up to the top of the water tower, and I'm up there, and I can see like the whole town laid out in front of me. I mean, just the mountain range, and it's just an awesome view, and I'm just looking over everything thinking, yeah, just feeling it. And so I climb back down the water tower, and I go down the dirt hill, and I go up into my house, my apartment, and I start dragging out, I kid you not, I'm dragging out my sofa, dragging out the front door, and I load it up on my shoulder, and I'm going up, charging up this hill, step over step, and I get to the base of the water tower, and I had brought this rope with me, and I climb up there, and I fucking haul my sofa up to the top of the water tower and set it up, and I fall back into it, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, just feeling so in the moment, just, And so I get up and I look at everything, and I climb back down the water tower, and I go back down the little road down to my house, and I go in there and I start wheeling my barbecue off I'm not fucking joking, wheeling my barbecue off the deck, and I hulk it up on my shoulders, and I'm carrying up the hill, and I get to the base of the water tower, and I pull a sucker all the way up there. I am cooking up a steak with a fatty Corona right there, sitting back on my couch, eating this steak, looking, the sun's getting low on the mountainside, and I am just in the moment. It was an amazing moment, and I can just hear on this megaphone, "You on the water tower." And I look over the edge, and there is the utilities company, there's the PD, there's the sheriff's department, there's all these vehicles coming up, and they're pissed. And I'm saying, okay, I'm coming down, and they freaking grab me, cuff me, put me in the back of the police car. They're yelling at me. I've been setting off these pressure sensors all day on the top of the water tower, and they are angry with me. They ended up bringing me down. Before they brought me down, they sent up their junior man up there to push all my shit off the water tower, and I'm in the back of the police car going, no! I mean, yeah, my couch was crashing down, all my stuff, and the barbecue I had borrowed from my brother-in-law. So it's not my barbecue, and he had borrowed it from the chief of police. They were pushing the chief of police barbecue off the water tower, and I was, I got charged with terrorist tampering with city water supply. I'm not joking. It was a felony. They haul me down to the precinct. I need to get bail, pulled out of there, and instantly, I have a charge. I'm not going in the Navy. I'm not going to be able to follow this dream to be a Navy SEAL. And I'm sitting there going, what happened? That happens to me throughout my life. I don't know how to stop. 1,000 is really never enough. I mean, if they hadn't stopped me, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have had that steak and called some friends, and people would come up there and join me on the water tower, would have had some drink. I don't know when it would have stopped, but something, I just keep going till something stops me. I don't know where that came from or what that is, but that has been the crux of my whole life, happening over and over again. And not just with running or water towers, but with drugs, with alcohol. I mean, it was just women, shoplifting. I mean, this continued throughout my life of just getting something good and getting some more and keep doing more and more and more and more and more until my life erupts in chaos. So, I didn't go away to prison. I had to get an attorney and show up in court. And, I remember my mom showing up and had a stack of letters from the community saying I'm a good person. And the judge came to my case and I pleaded that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, but this charge would prevent me. And I'm so sorry, Your Honor. And the judge did reduce the sentence to trespassing, so I was able to continue my quest to be a SEAL, and I was able to go into the Navy, and my life continued. And the Navy was, for all the bullshit that is the Navy inside, it has some amazing people who will do some amazing things. And I did make it through BUD/S, and I did get to the SEAL teams, and man, there's a lot of cool things about being a SEAL, and a lot of cool things and trainings you get to go on. But let me remind you, this is pre-9/11. I'm an old fucker. I'm like 50 years old right now. This is pre-9/11, and it felt, when we're in a time of war, I felt like I was just sharpening my knife forever. And it was frustrating back then. It really was. Despite all the cool things that we're doing as a SEAL, I did feel like when I would go out on liberty, I would party. I would party hard. And I'd always been, enjoy drinking. I had all the paraphernalia. And I think the military, maybe it's just the Navy, but I think the military kind of taught me how to turn pro in my drinking habits. I mean, they taught me how much to drink, how to get sober, how to show up and still do your job. It doesn't matter how hard you party as long as you can do your job. And I was doing that, and it was a great time, lots of travel. But after a while, it did seem like I was still pushing it. I was dabbling in ecstasy, I was dabbling in cocaine, I was, mixing different contraptions and pushing the limits and seeing how much you can get away with and bending rules and going out on liberty. And I know that my chiefs and my CO were sweating it whenever I did. And it felt like I was a time bomb. It really did. I felt like I'm going to end up blowing my life up again pretty soon. And I was getting binged up. I had a number of surgeries already. And I know around that time when I punched out, they were doing contracting overseas. The two companies I worked for were similar to Blackwater. I didn't work for Blackwater, but there were similar competitors of Blackwater. I worked for them, and I ended up going to Afghanistan a couple times and going to Iraq. And they made a lot more money, and they allowed me to party like I wanted to party. Would I have stayed in if I wasn't a drug-using alcoholic in the Navy? Probably would have stayed in longer, but they just had this sense that I wanted to do this more than I wanted to do that. And it was becoming more and more kind of consuming my life. Being young and in shape, and you could keep pushing through it made it doable. But as I kept taking these contracts overseas, and remember back then it's $1,000 a day tax-free in some war zone. I'm telling you straight up, it's not as honorable as serving in the Navy, but you got paid and you come back, and I would fucking party hard and deploy back over again. This continued for quite some time, and it was taking a toll on my health. It got to a point where I would go overseas to make my health points go back up, like in a video game, and I'd come back to the States and just destroy myself, and I was losing weight. And it got to a point, that I was like 130 pounds, at 6'2", 130 pounds. It's not a good look for you. And they said pass. And so I didn't deploy. I had to get a state-sized contract. I was still using pretty heavy then. I was doing a lot of work here locally in Virginia. Ended up, meeting a girl. We dated for a while. We ended up getting married. We had a son together. And, a couple of years into this, I was using pretty hard. I was getting sketchier and sketchier at work. I know I was... you know what driving by Braille was? There were many nights where I'd be like hitting those little rumble bumps because I hadn't slept all night, and I know I must have been looking hard at work, and it was getting pretty bad. More injuries were catching up with me. I wasn't taking care of myself. some of the stories are going to be hard for me to share with you all. Now I was losing respect for myself. I wasn't being a good dad. Wasn't going to be a good husband. It was getting harder and harder for me to keep up just my responsibilities. I'd disappear for a couple nights at a time on benders. They were becoming more and more frequent. I was lying every chance I got. I was shoplifting, trying to make ends meet, looking harsher and harsher. There were rumors circulating that Dice have AIDS. What's going on? And and I'm just lying, cheating, and steal, trying to make ends meet, and it was getting rough. This next part's hard. I was in the middle of a 3-day bender, and this was not this last pandemic, but the pandemic before, the H1N1, the swine flu. Remember that? This was during that, and my son was 2 years old at the time, and he was in daycare. And I was a couple nights into this bender, and my phone rings, and it's the daycare. And when you're fucked up like that, you don't answer the phone, and you let it go to voicemail. And I checked the voicemail, and the voicemail said that there's been an exposure at the daycare, and we're having all the parents come and pick up their kids. I'm 3 days into a crystal meth bender, and I'm thwacked out of my mind. And when you hear that, you go, oh no, my son's in trouble. My wife will get him. I'm sure she'll get him. And the phone rings, and it's my wife calling, and I let her go to voicemail. I checked the message, and she's out of the area. I need to go get him. She's angry as hell. No, she can't get a hold of me. The daycare calls. I don't answer. The wife calls. I don't answer. Daycare calls. Wife calls, and I'm not answering. And I'm sitting there I'm going to go in a little bit. I keep telling myself, I'm going to go in a little bit. Let me just get straight. I'm keep using 3 hours of ignoring these phone calls, of knowing that my son needs me, and my whole life I've been training to be his hero, and he needs me now, and I can't put this down. I can't get away. I turn my phone off and I throw it under the bed, and I don't go home for several more days. If you could hear a spirit break, it broke that night. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. I had this hatred. Every time there was anything of me looking at myself in the mirror, there was like a grumbling fucking son of a bitch. I mean, it wasn't like I was looking to kill myself, but when I used hard, I didn't care if I woke up. I mean, it was just, I was looking for, at the end, I hated who I was, what I'd become. That wasn't my bottom. I mean, I kept using, but I was using hard. I was spiraling, wasn't showing up to work, looking harsh. And about a month later, I was on another bender like I do. And I was in this house that had like multiple rooms in it. It's like 3 a.m. in the morning. And there's like all kinds of debauchery going on in like every room. Like there's people shooting up over there. There's fucked up sex over there. Just crazy shit. Dirty. And I'm just, you get overwhacked. And there's these 2 kids I remember there. And they're like young, like 12, 13. They didn't have shirts on. And they're running around the house with these airsoft rifles that shoot these little plastic pellets. And they had like horrible weapons handling skills. And they're sweeping the shit out of me. And I'm like cringing and just getting angrier with them. And I get frustrated. And I get up and I leave. And I go upstairs. And I remember coming to in a pile of dirty laundry with one of those kids kicking me in the leg. Kicking me in the leg saying, hey freak, and he's aiming this pistol at me. And I roll over and I look up at him, and I don't even look at the gun, I look straight through up into his eyes, and I will never forget. I mean, it was like I was looking into shark eyes. They were dead. Like all semblance of innocence were gone. This kid had seen too much too soon in his life. It freaked me out. I mean, I was looking at that and all I could see was, this is what's going to happen to my son. That I could see the path my dad had laid, and I'm running like these grooves going off a cliff, and I'm heading off the cliff, and I know my son's going off the cliff with me. I was just like, that hit me so hard, seeing the future of what was going to be in store for my son. And that's, for whatever reason, I went down to the kitchen and I dug out a phone book. And for those of you who don't know what those are, it's like the internet in the book form. And you open it up, and I randomly looked up treatment centers. I just put my finger down on one and I called them up, and they had a bed. It was the Farley Center in Williamsburg. I was 9 hours late for checking in. I was like 51% of me knew I had to go, but 49% of me fucking wanted to use. And I remember there being a tornado warning that day, and as my wife is driving me up there, I'm looking out the window praying that a tornado hit. They checked me into treatment there, and I can remember fiending, digging in the seats, looking for one more pill of something, and washing it down, one last drink, just desperately not, like this precipice of not knowing what's gonna happen. And I get into this treatment center, and the first couple days, of course, always suck, and all the therapists there sound like Charlie Brown, and I couldn't hear any of them. Yeah, and I just don't want to be there. And I find out they're 12-step recovery places. I'm like, oh, fuck me. And I just didn't want to be there. Day 3 goes by. Day 4 goes by. Day 5. And I'm sitting, you sit in these little small groups in this little room. There's a therapist and a bunch of other patients, and we're all sharing. And I'm just sitting there looking out the window, being freaking miserable. And I know the chair I was sitting in, the light switch right next to me, and I'm looking out the window at this tree. And I knew I hated the person I had become. And I desperately wanted something different. And I'm looking out that window, and I know I'm dating myself, but you know those little Viewmaster things where you pull a little lever and a little disc goes and a new picture kind of pops into play. I felt like as I'm sitting there looking out the window, there was my life kind of went click, and I'm thinking, maybe I could change. Maybe this could work. I mean, it was just a maybe. It was so freaking small. It was just a small little maybe. Maybe this could fucking work. And I sit up in my chair and I look at the therapist, and his eyes pop up and he goes, "Where did you come from?" And I think it was probably the first time I ever looked him in the eye. And I was kind of listening to what he said, and I was like wanting to be there, and I'm listening and interacting a little bit. It was hard at first, and day 6 goes by, day 7, and I'm getting a little more. I want to be there. Day 8, and on day 9, there's a knock on our door, our treatment room, and they say, "Mr. Dice, can you come with me?" And they take me down and it's called utilization review, and it's like the insurance people, and they take me down and they sit me down and they say, "Mr. Dice, your insurance carrier has deemed that we're going to move you to a lower level of care." And I'm saying, are you telling me I'm going to have to leave here? I thought this was a 28-day program. I just now want to be here and you're asking me if I want to leave? And they're like, calm down, Mr. Dice. I said, you want me to leave right now when I finally want to be here? And I started yelling. I'm grabbing the sides of my chair, and I'm like, I was so angry because I knew if I left, I would use and relapse, and why would you do this to me? I was so fucking angry with them. Oh my God. And they said, Mr. Dice, is there anyone you can call? You only need $9,000. And I'm like, who the fuck is $9,000 in rehab? That's crazy. And they let me go to use a little phone, and I'm calling everyone I know, and no one's giving me money. I mean, I've burned a lot of bridges at this point. No one's giving me any money for rehab. And I feel like I'm doomed. I mean, I was scared of being that guy again. That guy who fucked over his son, who blew up his life, who lost everything. I don't be that guy. So I had a thought. I asked my therapist for a 4-hour pass, and he says, what is this for? I said, I still have my car. I'd like to go try and sell my car. He gave me the pass, surprisingly, and I went down to CarMax, and I sold my car. I'm sure they ripped me off, but it was enough to cover treatment. And I was at CarMax, and I remember getting this check, and it was I don't have to go back. I was tempted. I didn't, this was a lot of money. My addict brain starts thinking. And I mean, if it weren't for that little bit of hope I had gotten looking out that window, I don't think I would have made it back. In fact, I was scared to go cash it. I went straight back to the Farley Center, and I asked them if I could endorse this to them, and they accepted it. Back then, they accepted all forms of payment. They took the check and let me stay. And I tell you what, treatment was different for me then. Like, I had skin in the game. I felt like I was playing poker, and I just pushed all my chips into the middle of the table because this had better work, because this is everything I got. I'm putting into this. And I'm sitting in the front row of every lecture, and I'm not talking to anybody. I'm like, shh. I felt like I was back in rigor school. And for those of you who don't know what rigor school is a Army school where they teach you to pack and repair parachutes. And the final exam in rigor school is you pack and jump your own parachute. It's a pass-fail exam. A lot of people pay good attention in this class. There's not a lot of distractions going on because your life literally depends on it. I felt that way in treatment. I was literally trying to take down crazy notes, and when I look back at those notes, I can't decipher what I was writing because I was just a crazy person. And I just felt like if I missed one little piece of information, I'm going to relapse. And so I was taking all the suggestions. I remember one therapist there said that when I was young, I never learned how to self-soothe. And they asked me to go out to Walmart and get myself a teddy bear and carry it around with me 24/7 for the rest of the time while I was in treatment. I'm like, I'm a Navy SEAL, but okay. I went up to Walmart. I got myself a little black teddy bear. I gave him a little armband with a skull and crossbones, make him look tough, and I carried this teddy bear 24/7 the rest of the time I was in treatment. I was willing to do anything they said to not be who that person was before. I mean, that's the state I was in. I was scared to be me. I was scared that I would somehow screw this up like I always did. So as the weeks went by in treatment, I felt like I was running from the disease of addiction. And I was trying to do everything I could to put barriers between me and relapse. And it was tough. I remember my therapist said one day, get a sponsor, you're going to die. And I went to the very next meeting I went to, and I didn't know how to pick a sponsor. I just picked the biggest guy in the room. That was my only thought process, was that I'd listen to that person. That guy ended up being my sponsor for 9 years. Saved my life umpty-ump times. So as I near the end of treatment, they say when a good indicator that you're ready to leave treatment is when you don't want to go. And I love the community there. I was I felt safe. But the next step was going out, and into the world of 12-step recovery and meetings. And I went to an IOP program, and an IOP is an intensive outpatient program where 3 times a week you meet in a small group and you process what you're going through, and that was freaking life-saving. And I got myself a sponsor, and I was invested in 12-step recovery, and my sponsor gave me some initial guidance of if you're not at home, you're not at work, your ass is better be in a meeting, and those are the 3 places you could find me. It was like I took my addictive tendencies and aimed them towards recovery. And I would, sometimes go to 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings a day if I wouldn't have to be someplace else. And you think when I get home that the home life would be vastly improved, but it wasn't. There was, I was going to meetings and I was talking to my sponsor and I wasn't talking to my wife and I wasn't being at home and I was getting yelled at. And it was interesting because I was not drinking and I would get really angry with my wife yelling at me, and I'm like, I finally did what you wanted me to do. I finally quit drinking, and here you are, still not happy. And they're like, you never talk around. You're always going to your meeting. You're talking to your sponsor. Where are you going now? You're going to call your sponsor? And just kind of, we'd have these huge, almost getting worse arguments at home. And my sponsor, said, hey, that's the power dynamic that you existed in while you're using still exists at home. The only way your spouse knows how to communicate with you is by yelling at you because you're always screwing up, and that's the power differential. And man, it was tough. It was tough being at home. There was a lot of times I want to say, screw all this. I'm going to get in trouble anyways. Might as well go out and have the fun. And I, knock on wood, I didn't relapse, but there was many times where I came close. One time I remember we were having this huge argument and it kind of rolled out into the front yard, like just the cringe kind of, and we're yelling at each other, and she gets in the car and she takes off, peels out down the street, and I'm like flicking her off and yelling. It makes me cringe thinking about how bad it was. And I go into my garage, and there's this Lazy Susan. I don't know if you know what it is. It's like a bunch of shelves on a pivot that spins, and you can get all kinds of nuts and bolts in it. And I smack it off my dad. I was so angry. Fuck her. It bounces and things go everywhere. And out pops this little stem. And I'm looking at it, sitting there, and my jaw gets hard. I have to lock it up. I get into drool, and I'm looking at it, and I am so angry. And I could fuck her by fuck me. And it's like I could see right down the stem and all the... Oh my God, I was shaking. Knocked on the ground, stepped on it, and I called my sponsor, and I was shaking. I was so close to just fucking it all up. I don't know. I kind of personally feel if I had gone to one last meeting or called my sponsor one last time, I wouldn't have that moment of clarity to call him to get out of that. That was one of the closest times I ever came to using. I wanted to use so bad. And my sponsor, it's funny when you get clean and you get sober and you're working a program, and it feels like you kind of emerged out of this cave that you were in. You're beginning to see in color again. You're beginning to feel emotions again, but you also have this feeling that your whole life just blew past you, and all your peers have gone on with their lives, and everyone's just kind of left you behind because you're just in the smoldering rubble of chaos that you just invoked in all your whole world, and you're like, and you have this tendency to want to get back on track. Let's get a super job. Let's get back on track. Let's start being productive again. And my sponsor told me that, slow down, work on you. And I said, well, I want to go back to school and I want to get out there in the workforce. And he's like, school to go what? You don't know who you are. I was like, what? I've done a lot of things. I think I know who I am. And they said, trust me, you have no clue. So that whole year, my sponsor said, you are a student of recovery. And he took me through all 12 steps, the 12-step recovery program. And it took over a year to get through them. But at the end of them, I'm having this part of that process is me sponsoring another young man. I'm beginning to have this feeling of, wow, I'm much more emotional than I realized. I have more empathy than I thought I had, and this connection people have when they sit down and they're able to, speak intimately between each other, and I was really enjoying it. And so I told my sponsor that I think I'm ready to go back to school, but I want to work in the service field. I want to help people, like social services. And he says, "See, go for it." And I went to TCC, a junior college here in Virginia, and I got my associates in social services, and that was my first degree. And I transferred to Old Dominion University, and I got an undergraduate degree in human services. And I'm doing internships like at the psych center, the Virginia Beach Psych Center, and at the Seton Youth shelters, and I'm learning how to be at service in a different way, and I'm learning how to sit down and speak authentically with someone and be there. One of the things that was amazing to me when I was in treatment is that my whole life I've been training to be a hero, to be there for someone. And as a firefighter, you have your turnouts and your hose and all your kit, and as a paramedic, you have your med bag and your duty belt and your radios, and in teams you had your M4 and all this shit you carry to show up and save the day. My therapist showed up with a cup of coffee that morning and saved my ass. I was blown away at how real and authentic and how just perfect it was just to be me in the room with you, trying to help each other get through this. So after I got my undergraduate, I went back for my master's in counseling, and 5 years to the day when I walked out of the Farley Center, the 5 years to the day from the day I walked into the Farley Center, I walked back in again and asked them for a job. They gave me a job. It was weird going back in there. It was like I was walking on hollowed ground. I mean, it was exactly the same. You've seen the addicts and alcoholics walking up down the hallways. It was very surreal. Dre Summers, who was my therapist when I was in treatment, still worked there. He kind of took me under his wing, and I got to learn how to be a group therapist and run groups and being part of this huge process of giving back. There was a moment there. Dre was going on vacation, and he wanted me to cover his group while he was gone. So I'm sitting there in his office in the same room that was my group room when I was in treatment. And I'm sitting in my therapist's chair, because I'm now the therapist. And I'm looking over in the seat that I was sitting in, next to the light switch, at this other addict looking out the window. And I was overwhelmed with this wave of emotion, of understanding of everything I've been through my whole life, leading up to this point, so I can be here for this person sitting in that chair and watching them look out the window. And I just had this sense of being right where I was supposed to be. Of everything I've done in that moment, I had a sense of, wow, this is a calling. Yeah, and I must have looked like I was about to burst into tears, but I'm trying to keep my shit together because I have a room full of patients, and here's your therapist about to lose it. But it was amazing, the feeling of being there, going full circle and ending up right where I'm supposed to be. So after working there for many years, it's funny when in academia you got this thirst for knowledge and understanding really grips you. And throughout my time in my master's, I was doing a lot of presenting and research, and I began to be really taken by what happened to me, trying to understand. 12-step recovery was, it looks like this, mystical words written on the back of some church wall, and trying to understand this process that happened. And I began to put some effort into looking into what embedded theories are found in this, trying to dissect it apart. And this desire to present and dig deeper motivated me to go back to school. And I went back to Old Dominion University. I got my PhD in counseling, supervision, and education. And this one that became Dr. Dice. And I kind of furthered my studies into the embedded theory found in 12-step recovery. And, from that, I made it my mission to kind of to get this word out, because there's something amazing that happens. It's not voodoo mumbo jumbo that magically you get better. There's actually some pretty evolved theory that takes place. The first part of the 12 steps you go in is about you, it's all stage the change stuff of you coming to grips with your problem and looking at the chaos that ensued, and accepting that this is part of you and there needs to be action taken. And the next part you're rolling into is just, narrative therapy, reliving your past, coming to grips with it, owning it, being okay with your story, sharing it with another, reprocessing that data. And then you move into CBTs and the following steps where you're taking action to affect change in your behaviors, and then righting the wrongs of your past. And then the final steps are just existential, finding purpose, connecting to others, being part of the greater whole, keeping yourself on course, and being of service to others. And so there's a lot going on there. And I began presenting at first at the regional and then at the national level. And I had the distinct honor of presenting at the International Association of Counseling's Global Summit in Italy, and just getting this word out to people about what's going on in 12-step recovery and what happened to me. Because it truly was an amazing transformation, not just for me stopping drinking and using and destroying my life, but for me discovering this other side of me that I did not know existed. Believe me, I spent my whole life, trying to kick in doors and kicking ass and just being this, trying to run towards the gunfire, running towards adventure my whole life. And there's this whole other side of me that was unnourished and underdeveloped, of this empathic connection with others, and this voyage of self-discovery that it took me on. This inward journey helped me find peace, and that this feeling that I needed to, my whole life I've taught myself to make myself feel better from the outside by doing something on the outside to try to change how I feel on the inside, was 180 degrees out. That feeling starts from within. And I was able to find my path in service. And so, the Farley Center was good to me. They allowed me to further develop a program, military program, or I was able to work with veterans, law enforcement, and first responders in an IOP setting. It was very successful, and got to work intimately with these other populations. And these populations, they're very trained to have their dukes up. And I mean this mentally. They'll say, "Hi, I'm doing great," but they're not letting you in. And I don't care where you work, there's a lot of stigma of being an addict and alcoholic, or even mental health issues as a whole. And very few people will allow to bring our dukes down enough to get help, because this is a very unnatural stance for many people, myself included. I'm much more comfortable here. And to be able to converse and commune with someone in a way that allows them to lower their guard so that real work can get done is something I was drawn to. And someone did it for me, and I thought I could better affect change by doing it for others. So after getting my doctorate and continuing to present, working with the Farley Center, I eventually, I have a very near and dear friend of mine, Scott Bishop, and we formed our own company, Bishop and Dice Defense, and it was, a defense of the mind and body. It was, tactical supply and mental health services, and it was a way to kind of commune these worlds, because there's a whole population out there that doesn't trust. And if I can find a way to sit down with you and show you that I've been down a road that may be similar to yours, and I found a way out that might work for me, maybe it might work for you. Even if it's not the same way as mine, just know that the solution, the opposite of addiction, is connection. At some point, there needs to be able to connect with another to get out of where you're at. Remember, your own thinking got you to this place in your life. And it's going to take more than your own thinking to get you out. It's 2023, and I have coming on 13 years of recovery. Knock on wood. My life has changed dramatically in every way. I have a beautiful wife who is in recovery. I have 5 kids. I have a beautiful house. I have resources that I can use to help others with. This is my chance to give back. And I want people to know out there that they're not alone. And it's so hard for those out there who are high functioning, driven people that keep causing chaos in their life. And it's a lot of work being a high functioning addict or alcoholic. It is. It's a lot of work. And I want you to know that someday, if you're able to shed that weight vest of addiction, your life is going to take off like you never dreamed. And so my goal for you, if you need help out there, if you're wondering how to get through what you're getting through, is to reach out and ask someone who's been there how they did it. And you'd be surprised how many people where the essence of their story is the same, even though the details are different. You're not alone. Please reach out. For more information, you can visit our website at www.bishopdicedefense.com. My name is Dr. Dice. This has been my story. I'm hoping some of you can hear it out there and get the help you need. Thank you for sharing your time.